Farellon has produced copper at about 1.8% over the years. And, historically, from the time that we've been underground, we've been cash flow positive, since basically 2018 when we started to really focus on extracting material from Farellon. But the next big step for us is, of course, building a mill.
Hello to viewers tuning into Assay TV. In this edition, we're catching up with Altiplano Metals. And I'm speaking with Alastair Mclntyre, President and CEO of the company. Alastair, welcome.
Thank you. Good morning, Adam. Good afternoon for you, I guess it is.
Indeed, yeah. Thanks for chatting with us today. Let's start off by getting an overview of the company, for investors, prospective investors who might be new to the company. What's the history and certainly what's the strategy as well?
Sure. Yeah. Well, thanks, Adam. But basically, Altiplano is a Canadian mining company, junior mining company. We have a focus on revenue generation as a revenue generator model. So we have a number of assets that basically look to generate cash. And with that cash, we can use that to develop assets of significant scale from an exploration perspective. So that revenue generator gives investors that opportunity to get exposed to cash flow, but also capture that upside in terms of scalable exploration projects that we look to bring into our company.
Yep. And could you just tell us a little bit about the team and who makes up your executive team and brings some real experience into what you're doing?
Sure. Well, the benefit that Altiplano brings to the market, to our investor, to our shareholder base, is that we're part of the Metals Group. The Metals Group is a collection of individuals who've been involved in the industry for a number of years, have had great successes with respect to both monetizing assets, raising capital. So we're able to be able to utilize expertise, but also flatten out administrative costs. And perhaps most importantly is that we have access to good technical teams, both in Vancouver, Edmonton, and also in Chile. And so the Metals Group, basically through their success, has been able to acquire a number of projects globally through a number of companies within the team, within the fold. Altiplano fits within one of those 10 or so companies. And so as a result, those people, those companies who have good assets, they look to monetize those assets, of course. And so they come to us at Metals Group to provide opportunity for us to work together. So that's one of the benefits that we see quite well from an Altiplano perspective. And so also that gives me access to mining engineers, geology, and teams that basically, these single junior mining companies have difficulty basically getting access to.
Yep, indeed. Essential, if you're going to succeed in these challenging environments.
Sure, and the important thing from mining companies' perspective is about management, and investors, of course, should be looking to good management to manage these companies. Good assets come with good management. Typically, they don't necessarily go the other way. So good management always has a way to find good projects.
Absolutely, yeah. When we speak to funds and when I interview, on the buy side, it's management first, of course.
Indeed.
Okay, so let's move on to the projects then. You've got Farellon, which I believe is the flagship asset at the moment. It's an iron oxide copper gold project. It's very interesting. Tell us about this project in particular.
Yeah, Farellon is, as you've mentioned, it's an iron oxide copper gold vein structure. We've been underground at Farellon since about 2017. It was an historical producer from the 70s, and through that period of time, we've essentially been developing a number of working phases as we move further into development. We're certainly currently at the 360 meter level underground, and with respect to our mine section, we can see that basically we've had a number of phases that we've worked on from a development perspective. So the good thing about an iron oxide copper gold system is, of course, gives you access to some very important strategic metals. We're mainly looking at the extraction of copper. There is a byproduct of iron, which basically can provide significant returns in terms of that secondary product, and also there's a smaller amount of gold. But back to that vein structure, and the vein structure is very predictable. It's a steeply dipping vein system that makes it easier to mine. It's on average from say 2 or 1.5 to 4 meters in width. Sometimes we see 8 meters in width. But the most important thing is it's good grade. It's high grade. On average, Farellon has produced copper at about 1.8% over the years. And, historically, from the time that we've been underground, we've been cash flow positive, since basically 2018, when we started to really focus on extracting material from Farellon. But the next big step for us is, of course, building a mill. And if you want to chat a bit more about that, happy to do so.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's come on to that in a minute. But I just wanted to touch on some of the advantages that you can glean for Farellon around coming to this as a brownfield site, as a sort of pre-existing mine. There's a lot that you can do to sort of leverage that position, as a junior company. Tell us about some of that.
Yeah, well, I mean, from our perspective, and this is one of the reasons why we like Chile, is that there are a number of projects that have been in production previously, that there are good geological and technical information available that we can review. We don't necessarily focus too much on the feasibility studies or the reserves that are on the project or life of mine. These are smaller assets that we look at from a very nimble perspective, that it takes a certain amount of capital, sort of $1 to $5 million, and we can get underground and get mobilized and begin to extract material for sale and capture that revenue. And that's how we had an interest in Farellon from the outset. And of course, we were also working on a project, Maria Luisa, which is to the north of us, and that's very similar to Farellon in its early stage, in the sense that we've effectively negotiated an agreement with the landowner. We are able to now basically begin work on the project, because effectively we've essentially had that permitted, and that's a very high grade gold copper project, in the sense that it basically will or has had historical production in the order of 6.8 grams gold and 1.9% copper. So these are assets that we like. We can get in there very nimbly. We can effectively use a budget that would be similar to a drilling budget, yet be in a position to capture revenue from these types of projects.
Yeah, excellent. Just before we delve into the mill construction then, so in terms of the deadlines or sort of key next milestones for the drilling programs,
right.
do you have those, any key milestones before the end of the year, for instance?
Well, I mean, we basically are looking at drilling from 2 different types of capacities, or 3 from that matter. We were very fortunate in the sense we bought our own drill a few months ago, so that gives us that sort of opportunity to move the drill around and not be basically kind of handcuffed to suppliers or contractors' schedules. And with a robust exploration environment going on in the world these days, sometimes these things can be issues, and of course with COVID and all kinds of supply chain issues, it's just good to have your own kind of equipment to manage. But currently, and to your point, we're drilling underground at Farellon. We have a number of drill locations that we have set up. We're soon to complete that first, and we will soon be able to bring out some information in terms of our progress. But our purpose here with the drilling underground is to further define what we've seen with respect to the vein, to determine and establish that the vein structure continues at depth, that we're going to continue to see the width, continue to see the grade, and this will guide us for further development underground at Farellon. So that's kind of where we have with respect to our first stage of drilling, and those results should be coming out pretty soon. We have also opportunity to bring our drill, as I mentioned, to Maria Luisa, and at Maria Luisa, where we're just beginning to do the underground work. We're starting to clear land and begin the work needed to start to access a portal. We will do further exploration drilling to define precisely how we will have or manage our underground operations. And that's specifically for the region that we see, which is in the west of the concession. And there's a northwest vein structure that runs within that area. But also to the north of us, we've seen some pretty good grades, around some chip sampling that we did, underground in the order of, say, 8 grams of gold over, say, 5.5 meters. And, we intend also to have an underground exploration program on that particular side of the project, after we, of course, do the appropriate technical review and permitting, et cetera. But we'll bring our drill to that area to guide us in terms of getting the proper technical information that's needed. Now, the third point is that, of course, we have Pastillas, and we've just acquired Pastillas a couple of months ago. And Pastillas is in a great region of Chile, in the Maricunga gold belt, where we've got great real estate, because there's a number of projects that have been in production, that are currently in production, and there also has been a number of projects that are currently in development. So overall, that area is a huge 100 million ounce type of area in terms of past production, current development resources, et cetera. Combined from all the work that's been done there. So we're very excited by that area. And so that's, a number one priority from an exploration perspective. And I mentioned earlier, this whole business for us is to provide, investors the exposure to both cash flow, but upside, because, the real benefit for those who invest in junior mining companies is they want upside, and that comes from the exploration side. So our cash flow can fund all of this development and exploration work. So that puts us aside, from most. So that's the kind of three-pronged approach that we have with respect to drilling.
Okay, let's talk about the development of the mill specifically. You're constructing this mineral processing plant. A great initiative in terms of what it's going to be able to do to your production process, but also in terms of positioning you as a junior mining company that's doing the right things in terms of state-of-the-art technologies. Thinking of meeting the ESG criteria that investors are very much scrutinizing at the moment. You're going to be improving a number of efficiencies across, particularly the environmental processing, as well as improving the cost of the overall project. But tell us about these things.
Well, the number one priority, for Altiplano, of course, is to provide, return to shareholders and improve shareholder value. And that comes both, from the revenue perspective, but also from the environmental ESG perspective. Being a mining company, you have to have best practice principles in order to attract, interest to the company and new investment, et cetera. So the mill, from that first perspective, is designed really to enhance revenue, because we essentially are using a third-party processor who give us credit for the contained metals. So having our own mill will be able to give us control over those contained metals, the ability to sell to whomever we wish in the market, and ensure that we're getting the recovery that we're intending to see from our production. And of course, we can capture additional iron, as I mentioned, oxide as a secondary product. And that's iron's been under a little bit of selling pressure recently, but markets move up and down. But producing a couple thousand tons of a byproduct that on average in the last number of years has been trading at $150 a ton is pretty good revenue just from a byproduct perspective. But the most important thing of having your own mill, of course, probably not the most important thing, but one of the important things is that we are reducing transportation costs, because the facility itself will be 15 kilometers away, so we reduce our trucking costs by about 75%. And overall, having the mill in place and functioning and producing a copper gold concentrate will reduce our processing costs by about 33%. Looking at it from the state-of-the-art technology, this mill will incorporate a number of important considerations. Part of this is we're still working through some of the permitting process. Of course, we're permitted to move the mill from a construction perspective, but final will involve a dewatering stack and also a magnetic separator to capture that iron. So the beauty of these two types of facilities operations is that it basically, as a dewatering stack, you produce a dry tailings, and those dry tailings don't need a traditional, tailings dam that has, geotech padding and tailing walls, etc. We remove the water, and effectively we have a dry tailings, like a sand that we can move around, we can pile up, we can move at cell or etc. But also, importantly, it reduces our fresh water consumption by about 75%. And water in Chile is a precious commodity, so our ability to reduce our water consumption will be very important. And of course, with the magnetic separator, and as being an iron oxide copper gold system, about 41% or 40+% of the actual material is iron. So when we recover that iron from the crushed material, we're reducing our tailings by essentially 40 to 50%. So reduce our water consumption by 75% is very good, and also reduce our material that we push towards tailings by about 40-something% by capturing that iron, which becomes available for sale, is very efficient. So I think, from my perspective, once we get this all sort of in place and finalized in terms of completion of the mill, we will strive to be a leader in the small mining industry in Chile.
Yep, excellent. Do you have a date roughly for when the mill construction?
Yeah, well, I mean, these things are a little bit of a moving target with respect to permits and final sign off. But we're expecting that by end of the year, early the next year, that we will be in a position to have a copper concentrate produced. We're still looking to finalize a couple of details on the iron separation and the dewatering. But the whole construction process of putting everything together, where we are, is about 5 months, and we're about sort of 2 weeks into that. So I'm looking at that sort of 5-month period to get everything finalized.
Wonderful, excellent. Just to sort of sum up, then, the world needs a lot of copper if we're going to decarbonize and meet a lot of these environmental goals. There's the COP26 going on in Glasgow in a couple of weeks. It's big on the agenda, and copper is in very much in the bull market at the moment. What's the institutional, but also the general investor uptake of people ringing your phone like crazy at the moment, or is it a case that you're growing your shareholder register off of these really constructive things that you're working on at the moment?
Well, I think it's a little bit of both. I mean, people who are investing in mining companies are looking for quality of management, upside of opportunity through projects, and also exposure to the metals that those companies are involved with or mining or exploring for. And Altiplano, even from the metals group perspective, we like copper, gold, and silver. I mean, these are good metals, from the perspective that they're fungible, they're easily traded. There is a liquid market for the underlying. Investors understand these types of metals. Nothing against the vanadiums or lithiums or even uranium now from that perspective, but they're a bit more volatile and a much harder metal to be exposed to in mine, et cetera. So from that point of view, and from my background with respect to being in capital markets for a number of years, is that gold and copper will always basically be part of the mining industry, whether lithium comes and goes because of hydrogen replaces batteries, who knows? But end of the day, the world will continue to need copper, from a growth perspective in terms of just humankind, going from 4 billion to 8 billion in the last sort of 30-something years, is that most of those people are striving for a better life, and that better life usually means higher affluence with consumption. And of course, most of the world is moving towards an urbanization and industrialization of their economies. China, as an example, basically has now taken their 1.2, 1.5 billion people, and more than half of them basically are affluent, and that comes with purchasing cars and toasters and new condos, et cetera. And so that will always have a growth aspect, in terms of copper consumption. And, you know, from the supply side, there's a lot of projects that have become ancient in terms of their production profile. Cost of production has gone up. Not a whole lot of big discoveries have been made. You know, let's face it, I mean, copper discovery, from the time you sort of look at things to the point where you actually are starting to produce copper, can be as much as 15 years. And so exploration has really has dried up over a number of years. So the supply side is probably more of a concern from my perspective than the demand side. Demand's always going to be there, but supply is what could be in a consideration with respect to copper. So having said that, you know, I see that there is a good prospect, you know, for copper, and those who are producing or exposed to copper as a company will always, I think, from a mining perspective, be in good favor. Now the boil is off a little bit because we've sort of come off, you know, those highs at that sort of $4.50 per pound level, and the market's kind of consolidating a little bit to what we saw gold, you know, a number of months ago when we hit the highs. Everybody was out running after and chasing after gold companies or exploration stories, and that's come off the boil a little bit as well. At the end of the day, these are good levels, and these are levels that are attracting investors, and that's what we intend to leverage and to be focused in these metals, and to reach out to that investor community that has an interest in copper, and demonstrate that, you know, Altiplano is one of those companies that can give them a little bit of an edge, and also something that's a little bit unique in that market. You know, again, back to that revenue generation.
Yeah, certainly can. Excellent. Well, Alastair, thanks very much. Fascinating discussion, and really good to get insights onto both the projects and also the constructions and initiatives you're doing around improving CapEx and efficiencies as well. So we look forward to keeping in touch with Altiplano later this year. Thanks for speaking with Assay TV.
My pleasure, Adam. Thanks. It's good to chat with you. Thank you.